All right, folks, you're about to listen to a bonus huddle, a specially curated huddle from CMO Huddles that we run once a month with experts sharing their insights into the topics that are most important to our huddlers. The expert at this particular huddle was Sangram Vajre, a go-to-market expert, founder of Terminus, with so much goodness to share. It was an amazing conversation. Let's dive in. Our special guest today is Sangram Vajre, who is the co-founder of Terminus and co-author of the book, Move, the 4-question go-to-market framework. Sangram is a fellow marketer at heart, having led marketing at Pardot when it was acquired by ExactTarget, and then ExactTarget when it was acquired by Salesforce. Sangram was most recently named one of the top 15 voices on marketing by LinkedIn. Oh, what a great group, by the way, and hosts the top 50 business podcast called Flip My Funnel. And he just started a new venture called GTM Partners, as in go-to-market partners, which I'm sure we'll be hearing about. I'm delighted he's agreed to join us today to share his thoughts on how to rethink your go-to-market strategy. Welcome, Sangram. How are you and where are you?
Drew, I'm so glad we actually get to do this. I'm based out of Atlanta, and quick story on where, like on Friday, me and my family were leaving for a month to India because I've not been to India for like 6 years. So I'm looking forward to make that travel. So in the world of work from anywhere, I'm literally going to be working for a month from somewhere else.
Wow, good for you. That's exciting. But so before we get too deep into the topic at hand, I'm curious because I know you went to Nagpur University in Maharashtra. I don't think I pronounced that right, in India, but then you ended up at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Yeah. So how does that happen?
That might take the whole time, Drew. So I don't know how far everybody's interested in it, but yeah, that. A lot of people said that's a culture shock. I'm like, no, you got that wrong. That's a culture shock because you go from Nagpur, India, all the way to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's just a completely different, like football is a religion over there. Like it's a very different place. And for me to go in there, I'll share just one quick story on this. This was like my first week. I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 2002. And again, English is not my first language. I'm just walking in. I haven't even started the school, right? I haven't even gotten my master's program yet. So I'm going there looking for assistantship, or get paid for the assistantship for the rest of the year. Didn't have planned for that. So I go around, I go to this chemistry department, and there's this elderly Southern woman. I just picture this in your mind if you get like this conversation happening from somebody who just came off from India. And I'm having this conversation with her, and she could hardly understand me. I could hardly understand her. This is the very first conversation. And then I hand over my Indian typed resume, which totally she's like, where is what's going on? And I'm like, hey, look, I was literally doing hand motions after this because we couldn't communicate. You see that sign where it's outside, it says you need an assistant for your IT work. I can do that. Like, can I do it? She looked at me, looked at the resume, looked at me, looked at the resume. And then she said this. She said, I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box. And I'm like, I don't see a pencil in a box. Like, I couldn't understand that it was a phrase. It was a way of saying it. And she laughed, I laughed. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then my friends took me this 2002 VHS files were still like, I don't know how many of you guys remember VHS, like big VHS tapes were still in motion. They took me to the library and they said, we will tell you everything about America. They got me a full set of VHS files for Everybody Loves Raymond, Seinfeld, and Friends. And they said, watch this and you will know everything you want to know about America. And I'm like, I was binge watching before binge watching was cool.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. That's a perfect setup for talking about go-to-market, because this was go-to-market at a university where you might as well, foreign country, essentially a foreign language. Amazing, wonderful. And of course, in 20 years, you've come a long way and done some incredible things. I want to get right into the book because first of all, I really enjoyed it and I loved Move as an acronym. As you know, I'm a fan of acronyms. I've got the cats in my book and you use Move. So let's start there and maybe you can explain what each of those letters mean.
Sure thing. It literally is helping companies figure out what their next move is. So when you think about go-to-market, A lot of companies think about go-to-market in a way of a product launch, saying we're going to launch a product, so we need to think about it, or a marketing thing because it has go-to-market, so it's a marketing thing, or maybe a sales channel. Okay, maybe we're going to go to market, we're going to have a new sales channel to do this. So everything that I could read on this topic of go-to-market was very much focused on either a product launch or a sales channel or somewhat what marketing might do, and very little about the holistic view of what go-to-market is. So I ended up interviewing a ton of people, and you have the book, but I interviewed like Brian Halligan, who was the CEO of HubSpot, Mark Roberge, who's teaching at Harvard right now, Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight, many CMO, CEOs, VC, Kelly Ford, who had over 200 exits. And I was asking them and interviewing them around go-to-market, and that's literally what led to these 4 things and what I'm about to share. And what's interesting about this is we started with about 51 questions or so that we asked each one of them, and it came down to the 4 questions, which is what led to the acronym MOVE. So MOVE, the first one, M is market, O is for operations, V is for velocity, and E is for expansion. So you think about those 4 questions are literally the questions that Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot at that time, over 100,000 customers, public companies asking, all the way to an early stage startup, $1 million company. They're all asking the same questions, but the answers are different. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of it as you think about it. Market, who you should market to. Well, an early stage company might say, well, anybody who has a pulse, right? Because you're just trying to get a value and you're trying to see if you can sell it. But as you move forward and have, let's say you're a $20 million, $50 million company, you're now after going specific segment. So you're still asking the same question, but now you're focusing on something different. You think about operations, which is what do you need to operate your business effectively? In the early days, I remember at Terminus when we started, we were like 3 co-founders starting it, like we were running our own numbers. And then I added a marketing operations person or finance person who was running all the operations. But as you move forward, 2 years ago, as we crossed 50 million in revenue, we hired somebody who run RevOps for us, revenue operations. And some of you might be familiar with that role as it has emerged. Mallory Lee, who runs that, she literally would come in every Tuesday morning for an executive meeting. She will put a go-to-market dashboard. She would say, all right, here's how marketing, sales, CS, product usage, expansion, everything is, here's what our ARR to NRR looks like, and here's where we should focus on. And she would do that for 15 minutes. And it's probably the best part of my meetings when I was at Terminus, because I was like, wow, now we know where our business is and where we need to go. And now my understanding of operations or where we should focus on was very helpful. We were able to make business decisions. The third question, velocity, which is when can we scale our business? That is a most common question. Everybody's asking, when can we scale our business? And so in the book, we go about specifically people ramp, which is how quickly can we get people productive? And then the other part of the ramp is the enablement ramp. How do I make my go-to-market team, which is marketing, product, sales, customer success, all of them together, how can we make them enable faster? So those are the 2 ramps. Once you get these ramps together, you can figure out and answer the question, how can we scale our business faster? And the last one, E, is where can you grow the most? Talking to Scott Dorsey, who was the CEO of ExactTarget, he's the one who introduced this one. Initially, E was experience, and then it became expansion, because when he said, look, the thing that kept him up more than any other question, the market, operations, velocity, was E. He's like, if I can figure out where I can expand and grow the most, I don't know what the next year or 2 years would look like when you think about where you want to grow. So it could be, do I need to acquire a company? Do I need to do an agency partner? Do I need to hire more salespeople or marketing people? Do I need to go in a different region like North America to Europe or whatever? Those are all expansion questions. So hopefully, as you think about market, operations, velocity, and expansion, you can see that most, as I started earlier, people are thinking about go-to-market as a product launch or a marketing thing or a pure sales channel. It's really not. It's much more holistic than that.
You covered a lot of ground. And I think I'm going to throw a softball one at you here, which is, how do you tell when go-to-market is broken?
Oh, this group seems to be a good bunch. So you guys can drop in the chat. How do you know? Because we can pick on something like that. So drop in the notes as Drew asked the question, how do you know your go-to-market is broken? I go pretty deep in it. Drew, you can tell me my chat box is not right in front of my screen.
I got it. We've got churn. We've got team loses focus. Top of the funnel is not growing. Marketing is not involved in product discussion. Sales, marketing, and product groups have different goals. Sales and marketing not aligned, and customer experience issues. Wow, that's a lot. Wow.
Funnel constipation. That's what I see highlighted on my chat. Like that's a good one. These are all real challenges, so it's truly a softball. And if you're taking notes, this is the part I think maybe the most worthwhile part of the book is to figure out, how do I know my go-to-market is broken and where is it broken really? Because that really becomes the crux of the situation, because you could sense it, most of you in your organization, like something is not, the gears are not clicking yet. Like, I think we got this going, but this thing seems to be constipated, right? There's something going on that just doesn't work. And in the book, we go through these 5 different areas. Number 1, you can create but can't market. That's your first valley of death. You have a great product, but somehow your marketing is just not creating more at bat. So create but can't market. The second one is market but can't sell. Obvious, your marketing is awesome. And I'm assuming everybody on this call is an awesome marketer, so you can get a ton of demand or a number of people, more eyeballs, but somehow your sales is not converting them. So it's very important to isolate where the gears are not working so you can fix it. The third one is sell but can't deliver. This has happened to me a number of times where you sell, the salespeople are selling everything under the sun, and then the product team is like, wait a minute, we don't have that enterprise function. We don't have SOC 2 certificate. We don't have this, that, and the other. And you got an issue between, and this is important, the teams, the sales and product. Like, that's why the teams, that is very important, is marketing, sales, customer success, product all together. The fourth one is deliver but can't renew. This is where the churn issue that kills most businesses is that, oh, we're delivering product, but as soon as the end of the year, your customer is saying, Sangram, we love you. That's the most dreaded sentence anybody could say to somebody, because you know what's coming next. We love you. We love your team. We love your product, but we just don't know how to show ROI of this to get more budget. So deliver but can't renew. And the last one, which is renew but can't expand, which is really where the NRR, the net retention rate, becomes the bigger. The best companies in the world are going to have better NRR, as we're all recognizing it. So create but can't market, market but can't sell, sell but can't deliver, deliver but can't renew, and renew but can't expand.
Interesting.
Hey, Drew, could I ask a question that I think would be an interesting one for this group?
Sure.
I feel like we hear a lot about product-led growth right now, where everyone's like, hey, if you have product-led growth, that's amazing, and you actually don't need marketing. I'm curious if that might be an interesting spin on some of these topics, because I think there's like this real trend in the market where, hey, if that's what you have, you don't really need marketing. And in a lot of cases, even sales, it just is so magical. And I have thoughts on that, but I'm curious what maybe the team thinks or what Sangram thinks.
I'm happy.
Yes, where does PLG fit into this?
Yeah. And another thing, as you're thinking about it, is in our research that we did, this is again a 2-year plus research, is that you're typically more than one of these valleys of death. Like you're not just one, and it's never the case that you're done with it. For example, you might say, well, yeah, we got our marketing right. Guess what? As soon as you launch a new product, all of a sudden you have to reimagine who your target audience is, your ICP is, and you have to go back to the drawing board. So it's a more circular motion than that. So all the research that we have done, you typically are in at least more than one valley of death. So that's one. 2, on the PLG Heidi, that's a great question. I saw a post yesterday, and I think Sastra posted recently about it, like all these PLG-led companies have massive marketing budget, like massive marketing budget. You wouldn't think about like HubSpot. Let's just use them because I've extensively talked to Brian and Dharmesh, and many would think like the 60% of the new business that I get based on what they have reported actually is a PLG, because they're getting inbound and people are turning into and start. So it's 60%. It's a public $1 billion company. And they have a massive marketing budget. They have 20,000 plus people come to their inbound conference that they run every year. The budget is over 20 million just for that. And then on top of that, they have a massive sales army working on figuring out how do we create sales motion. And as a matter of fact, their CS team is also part of the sales team because they have to continue to create how do I move from SMB to mid-market or sell them different tiers and all those things. At a minimum, from my experience, I'll be curious to hear the group's reaction to it. I've seen that they have a bigger marketing budget than actually other companies that don't have PLG. And the reason I think they have a bigger marketing budget is because you're expected to have a bigger inbound machine coming in. You can't really have a big inbound machine coming in without a bigger marketing. So if you actually go in a company that believes in a PLG motion, marketing is actually going to get more budget than a typical traditional sales-driven company. The second point to this is I was reading Bloomberg, and I posted about this a couple of days ago. Bloomberg wrote the weekly Bloomberg that came out. It had a whole article around, I forget the name of this VC, and he said this thing. It says that companies don't die because their product stops working. Companies die because they run out of money. And it's a very sobering thought to think about it. Like, you can have a great product, but if you don't have the motions working from a go-to-market perspective and you don't have an effective and efficient business model around it, you would die. And this is a Bloomberg article, and he had a whole bunch of VCs and a whole bunch of companies and CEOs, but all of their valuations, he had to pick up the call, tell all of the founders and CEOs that the valuation that we gave you, which was over $1 billion, now you have to raise another round and it's going to be lower than $1 billion. And all of the CEOs and founders were freaking out. And some of them had PLG motions. And he's like, no, you're going to die if you don't raise another round because you're not a profitable business. And therefore, great product doesn't equal you surviving, which actually, it hurts to even say that. It's having a more effective business model is what's going to help you survive.
Interesting. I want to go back to, so we're talking about go-to-market. In your book, you say the CEO is the one who really needs to own GTM. I totally get that, but we've got an audience of CMOs here. What role do you see the enlightened CMO who understands your playbook for GTM playing in all of this?
I have a big notion on this, that the CMOs are the future CEOs. Like, each one of the CMOs.
Wait, say that again. I just want everybody to hear it. The CMOs are the future CEOs. Okay.
Yeah. CMOs are the future CEOs. And some of you already are probably seeing this. Like, I'll just say at Terminus, Tim Cock, who's running it, he was a CMO of ET. John Miller, like he was a CMO at Marketo, became the CEO of Engagio. Jeff Perkins, who I believe is on, like, he was a CMO and now is a CEO. There are like tons of examples that are actually brewing up. And in the next 3 years, I imagine there could be a lot more. And here's the reason why. It was literally the fact that CMOs are strategic. Most people think, well, the chief revenue officer should be the CEO because they got the number, they got the mallet, they got the whole thing, and and they have a number on their back and stuff. But here's the problem with that they're not as strategic as CMOs are. CMOs today have such a broader view of everything that's happening. You're touching every part of the business than any other business function for that matter. Plus, if you have RevOps and part of that comes in, I think you just make yourself really good. But the most important thing is that you are a strategic leader, more strategic than any other business leader that goes into a business. You're not building a product, so you're not focused on just product. You're not building a sales team. You're building a story, a narrative for your business. You're thinking about where we need to grow further. You're literally your CEO's best friend. And that's what I ask most CMO friends of mine, like, just go, because I mean, I've been in board meetings. You all have probably a bunch of board meetings. Board meetings are nothing but a storytelling, right? You're spinning the story and saying that, all right, this doesn't work, but we know this is going to work, and you have to have the conviction to do it. It's a CMO's wheelhouse element. So I think the CMOs are going to be the future CEOs. And I feel the reason I said in the book, and it came out of the research, is because, like, again, all these interviews, every single CEO I interviewed, they didn't even blink their eyes when I asked them, so who owns go-to-market? And they said, oh, I own it. Every CEO and every CMO I talked to, the CMO is like, I'm not sure. I think our CRO owns it, or maybe I own some part of it. But you ask a CEO, they will tell you straight up, they own go-to-market.
I get the CEO saying that they own it. And obviously they need to own it because it's all aspects of the business. I mean, it is fundamental. What's interesting is I'm thinking about the CMO as the future CEO. First, a lot of the CMOs I talk to don't want that. They don't want that job. That's part of one. But those that do, the way the role is defined today, The good news is, as you describe it, they're touching everything. The bad news is they're touching everything. And so it makes them vulnerable because there's so many things they could be measured on. And the only one they're being measured on is revenue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's do this. Maybe in the chat, just do +1 if you want to be a CEO. Let's see in this group how many of the CMOs want to be a CEO one day.
Okay. Oh, they're coming in, boy. They're coming in fast. All right. That's not all of them. That's not that many.
Okay.
Interesting.
And this might be a great conversation point too, if you want to open up, because a lot of times the idea of CEO is like, wait a minute, I don't know. To me, that is the most exciting time for the next year, because we all see these posts like, well, my CEO doesn't get marketing. And I'm not saying, well, you should never work for a CEO who doesn't get marketing. Well, whose fault is it? I think it's our fault as marketers, that we haven't done a great job of getting CEOs to understand our value beyond the leads and beyond the events and beyond all the other things. And I think the new modern leaders and CMOs are actually starting to see that, and they actually have more control in the boardroom if they want to. I'll share a real quick story on this one. Being part of, again, a bunch of boards and as an investor as well, there were 2 specific instances where the CEO was an operator, wasn't a marketer, and he was talking about a point of view of selling to marketers. The board stopped him and pointed all of their attention to the CMO and asked the CMO, what do you think? And the CMO, for the first time, felt like they literally had the power. And that CMO started talking about, like, here's what I would think about. Here's how we need to be empathetic towards them. Here's how we would go about it. And here's what I would do if I had a bigger opportunity beyond the budget that I have. The board unanimously decided that that's what they should do, gave more budget to the CMO, like literally as part of the board conversation. And it changed the whole rhythm of that company. And I watched that and I witnessed that and I looked at that and like, this is the part where I think more CMOs need to be vocal in their board meetings around this or get their story heard, because the board is aching to hear that story from the CMOs.
The fact that CMOs could very well be in position to become the CEO because they are in the most strategic role. I still want to step back for a moment and say, these are CMOs right now. And we've got the 4, the market, operations, velocity, and expansion. And then we've got the valleys of death. Where should a CMO right now, when determining GTM strategy, what do we want these folks here to do other than understanding what GTM is? And they can't own it because the CEO is supposed to own it, even if they don't. What do they do in this circumstance to make sure? Because let's face it, if the GTM is wrong, they lose. They're probably the first one out the door. Then the sales guy's out the door.
That is so true. Well, so the 2 things, and in the book, there is a whole chart that I put there for like, what is the role of a VC, CEO, CMO, and a CRO? And for CMOs, based on all the interviews, we identified like they are the galvanizers. You are all the galvanizers of it. Going back to, again, CMOs are very strategic. So the best thing you could do for your organization, and you're actually looked upon as like, yeah, they're the strategic leaders of business, is to set conversations, to have go-to-market conversations. Right now, what's happening is everybody's just reactionary in their mode. Oh, this doesn't work. Let me go fix that. But the CMOs, every time CMO is trying to do is like, is hurting the cats. Like, I think everybody probably feels like that's part of your job, is to bring people together. All right, we do not have the right target. Like the market, we're not going after the right ICP. We need to figure out, we cannot put all of our attention on SMB and mid-market and enterprise all together. Well, guess what? Who is going to make that conversation happen with the go-to-market executive leadership team? It's the CMO, because they get to help them. Is like, hey, look, tell me, where do I need to drive or point the guns to? Do we need to go after this or that? And they can bring things together. Who is responsible for them to create the right ICP? Who's then responsible to create and bring them? So it ends up becoming the CMO's role as a galvanizer of bringing these conversations together, where the CRO and others, they're now hitting, they're just, okay, we'll go there, we'll do this. But I think CMO is a strategic role. And if there's anything that I can impart in this group, is that you are the strategic leaders. Like literally from a board perspective, CMOs are looked upon as the most strategic leaders in the organization. And so, and I think more CMOs need to just accept that and own that.
This helps me a lot. The book, which outlines how to think about go-to-market strategy, what I love it is I can wrap my mind around it. My brain can understand what you're talking about, which gives it a pretty good shot of other people can too, because I like things simple. And this I thought was simple. So if you understand the framework and you drive it, but recognize the CEO is the decider, your job is to sort of lay it up there, get the teams together, get focused, and recognize that if you're you're in one of these valleys of death,
Yeah.
you got to say, hey, we're in a valley of death. We got to fix this. And here's how, and recognize sort of these four things. But it's funny because in number 2, which is operations, CMOs really only touch part of that. Obviously, there's a whole nother aspect of it that they're not touching, and velocity and expansion. So the most strategic part of this will be in market, right? Defining ICP, adjusting ICP, deciding when to expand, all of those things. That's the core strength.
That would be the starting point, Drew. I would, again, encourage and challenge everybody is that's the core strength. That's probably the most obvious area for all of us from a marketing perspective, and you're expected to do it. But I will throw this out as like, let's think about the one that you may think, oh, I'm not sure how we would do it. Like, it's probably velocity. Well, how can we scale our business? Like, how can marketing help? How's a CMO can do this? And I'll give you a clear example on that one. Velocity is about, as I was sharing earlier, 2 ramps: people ramp and enablement ramp. People ramp is like, how quickly can we get everybody in the company productive? Meaning, how quickly a marketer can create new demand, how sales reps can get quotas, how an engineer can, ship a product, a feature, like all those things. An enablement ramp is that how can my go-to-market team be on message, on target, and be able to drive the outcomes so that we appear to the outside world as in unison in what we are trying to do. So you got these 2 ramps, very important ramps in organizations to scale. From a marketing perspective, I'm seeing that the people ramp includes onboarding, and more of the marketing team is starting to have the onboarding part of the employee relationship, employee culture, hiring of that part is actually starting to become more of a really strength of marketing, because marketing is saying we can help create great culture, talk about what the culture we have and attract the right talent, and then create a great onboarding so everything is on point. So they can be instrumental. You can be instrumental on the people ramp. Now let's talk about enablement ramp. Enablement ramp, like, gosh, how many times marketing gets to say, give me more leads because we're not closing fast enough. Well, that's where marketing can come in and say, well, let's just look at how we're enabling the first call deck, the second call deck, the positioning around it, listening to all those calls and figuring out what content needs to be created. Marketing has a huge role to play on that. So even the one that you might think not sure, I think marketing is best positioned. I would actually say there's nobody else better positioned than the CMO and the marketing team to impact each and every of these 4 go-to-market questions. I couldn't be more bullish about it.
I'm with you. I totally agree. We've had lots of conversations in huddles in the last 3 months over the importance of onboarding, particularly when you're going through a brand refresh or, values or any kind of other sort of major brand shift, but also particularly in this moment of retention issues and recruiting issues, suddenly having a stronger brand seems to matter a lot more. And the CMOs are definitely the keeper of that. And we also spent a lot of time talking about enablement. It's funny because we talked about pipeline issues most of this month. It was the first time in a while where I heard a lot of sales isn't closing. We ended up with a lot of mid-funnel and lower funnel conversations. Sales isn't closing. And so the answer from sales was give us more leads. And then marketing's response was no, close the ones that you have. And so I felt like this tension is going up. And I think there are market forces outside of all of this where I think deals are closing slower. You may be starting to see that in general in the market. But I'm just curious in your mind, God forbid the sales and marketing divide resumes the way it was 10 years ago. But I feel like that's starting to creep into the conversation, and that matters. And that's where this enablement part really, I think you're talking about, comes in.
Yeah. What is truly inspiring, honestly, I think is I've gotten to a point where I can say all day long, sales problems or product problems. The reality is my job is on the chopping block. And I hope everybody recognizes that your job is on the chopping block at the end of the day, because I've never seen a company actually have given marketing more budget when the revenue numbers have dropped. Never seen in the history of like 15, 20 years of it. But at the same time, I've always seen marketing get unprecedented or more budget than the previous year when the revenue numbers have gone up. I've just never seen it actually. No, we're going to take money out of marketing because our company is doing good. No, it's actually the opposite. Marketing just gets more budget as soon as the revenue numbers go up. So point being, I've just learned, I've started companies where sales and marketing from a VC perspective is also one number. It's literally sales and marketing number. We're tied to the hip. You like it or not, you want it or not, it is what it is. So you have to live with it. So once you get through the S curve of like denial, shock, and all the issues that go through, and then come on the other side of the S curve and say that, okay, I got to deal with it. So what do I do? It is not a sales problem. It is your problem. The sooner you can bring it to the forefront, because if it's your problem, what you need to do is not say their problem. Is like, go back to the same thing. You are a strategic leader. So what do? As a strategic leader, you bring this as a key conversation, a strategy call, a conversation at the executive level. Hey, what are we going to do that? Because we can keep pumping in, but do we need more sales enablement people? Do we need less AEs? Do we need to pull a product thing? What do we need to do? I think CMOs are the best position to make those conversations happen, because you're watching this in front of your eyes. And as a matter of fact, I bet if you're really a numbers CEO who's looking at the numbers, not just the messaging part of it, but also the numbers, you probably have an early indicator on what's happening in the funnel before even sales looks at it. And I know some of you actually have seen that. It's like, I know this, I've seen this movie before. I know how this is going. So get ahead of it and start working it and create that strategic conversation. I think that's why the CMOs are the future CEOs to me.
So we're going to open this up for questions. And I see at least one question about changing your GTM strategy. Deidre, do you want to come on?
Hi. I'm really enjoying this. First of all, I was looking forward to this like all day. We are changing our strategy. We are going up market. We are looking to attract a larger seller than we have historically served. And I am building out that strategy. I'm freaking out a bit because I'm like, where do I start? Funnel or flywheel, all these things. And I'm wondering, number one, is building that strategy out when you are not launching a new product, you're just kind of changing who you're going after. Is that a different strategy or is that a different exercise? And then number two, when you're building out this plan, how granular do you get? I mean, do you want to include in your plan, like, these are the tactics I'm going to use? Or are you should this plan be a lot more high level, kind of maybe addressing the traditional 4 Ps?
My view on this one is, I've loved and used this word over and over, and the more I've used, the better it has gone for me as in my career, which is experimenting. We are going to experiment this for the next 2 weeks and see what works, and then come back and report and adjust, and then we're going to continue to experiment. I've just tried to use that word, and the day when I have given the full plan, the very next hour, things have changed. And I'm like, I don't want to do this ever again. So what I do is I have a high-level template of plan and ideas of like, here's what we might do, but I will constantly pushing the conversation. Hey, we're going to experiment this for the next 2 weeks. We're going to go and do these 2 things that I know for sure we're going to test. And we're going to try a couple more things, and I'm going to report, because that's the most important part, is report 2 weeks in, what happened, what did we learn, what are we going to do to try next? And that keeps the conversation going. A lot of times, having the plan has been the biggest challenge, the biggest problem of it, because now people are holding you to a plan when you know that, okay, that's not working, then why do you do it? In most cases, if you go with an idea of like, all right, we have these 2 things going on. I'm going to experiment these 2 things here and these 2 things here. And I'm going to report. I'm going to communicate every 2 weeks how that thing is going until we get to a point where everybody's on the same page. That's how I've gone about it.
And by the way, I mean, we talk about this, and I know Carolyn Spalding's a big fan of it, getting 10 to 20% of your budget always in experiments, because the experiments could be your full budget if things change, as happened at the beginning of the pandemic when suddenly events were off the table. So having experiments always helps. But I love that idea too, because the assumption is we have a go-to-market. Now we're looking at another go-to-market. You don't just sort of pivot because you don't want to give up what you already have, is the interesting thing. So you're building and trying to make it additive as opposed to sort of leave the last one behind.
One other thing I'll add, Drew, to that is something that I've said this and seen it, is that clarity is more important than certainty. I'll just say that again, like being clear is way more important than being certain. Like nobody can guarantee certainty outside of taxes and some of the things, like you really can't guarantee anything in life, right? So certainty is not what people are looking for. If you really peel the onion a little bit, you'll see that people are not looking for certainty. What people are really looking for is clarity. Like, what do you think? How clear are you about the next 2 things you're going to do? Because if you are clear about the next 2 things you're going to do, then in some ways there's certainty that you are going to get there. I don't know how, you don't know how, but there is a clarity on a path to get to the certainty. So I default is like, let me be as clear as possible, as quickly as possible, and see what we're experimenting on. And let's be so good, so clear about that. Just the next 2 steps, we'll figure out the rest of it. And I think that's what the executive team is looking from us.
Thank you for this observation. The challenge on if you're moving up from, say, small business to enterprise, you really have to have this question. And that's one of your valleys of death. Is the product right for enterprise? Is it ready? Because you could say, we want to go after them and then find out you can sell, but you can't deliver, which was one of the valleys of death. Okay. We had a question from Jen Houston.
Hey, Sangram, how are you? Thanks so much. This is a great conversation. So my ears perked up on operations because I think often a marketer doesn't always think about such a huge part of their job as operations, but I am totally intrigued. What were your indicators to be able to go through a full scale left to right, go to market in 15 minutes with the exec team? Because that's what we always struggle with there. What are the best indicators to demonstrate the progress of and you mentioned this was across 5 or 6 different parts of the business. So give us your secret.
Well, let me show you exactly what we did. The executive scorecard that we showed was literally in the 15 minutes of the best 15 minutes, and everybody knew what was happening in it. There was no question. I was like, well, I don't know how you pull together. So here's a template that's on the movebook.com, by the way. So it's called the go-to-market executive scorecard. So it has the net retention, ARR, expansion, all the way to the product usage. But it literally gave us, okay, where are we forecasting wise from net retention? Because at one point, that became the most important thing for us as a business. Now, you as a business today, ARR might be the most important thing for you. So you adjusted, make it, there's freedom within framework, all of it. But for us, we put the most important thing for this quarter was net retention rate. So we started thinking about that. And then we're looking at where we are forecasting wise. Not only that, we started looking at the bottom. This is, so you can see the leads and all the other information really got to the bottom of it. And we started to look at where we are. Even you think about the product line. So leading new ARR by product line. So every single product line had an ARR number assigned to it. And we started to look at it by product. We're looking at our funnel efficiency and seeing that, well, how fast are we closing now? Then here are all our segments. Our A, we already had a definition of what A type account engaged looks like, what B type looks like, and what our top 100 accounts look like. These were the most important metrics because we know 70% of our revenue was coming from these accounts. So how are we doing with these engagements across the board for top customer and accounts? We're looking at what are our product intent trends, how many of the new customers that are coming in that we know are seeing intent. This is an example where within 15 minutes, we knew we're not where we need to be on NRR. We're good on some of these metrics. So we're not even talking about the ones that are green. We're talking about the ones that are yellow or getting to borderline red. And that gave us the next 45 minutes to really focus on. So every person on the team started becoming a business leader specialized in marketing or product or sales. Nobody on that call was a marketing leader or a sales leader or a product leader defending their numbers and defend. Everybody was a business leader specialized in marketing. So it allowed everybody to be better.
So you mentioned in the book that GTM is not a project and that we should treat it more like a product. Can you explain what is that?
Oh, Drew, I'm so glad you asked that. That was the funnest conversation of all that we had with some of the CEOs. And one on the back of the book, you would see a quote from, like, I'll just use Brian now. I asked Brian Halligan, again, at that time he was the CEO, public company CEO, again. And I said, all right, who owns go-to-market? That was a common question of the 50 question we asked. And he said, I do. Come on, Brian, you're a CEO of a public company. You have many other things to do. I understand if the buck stops at the CEO, if you're saying it from that perspective, but no. Who in your organization owns it? And he's like, you don't understand, Sangram. There are only 3 things I own. I own the vision for the company, where we're going. I have to iterate that to the investors, to my team, to the partners, to the market, to the employees. I have to do that every day, 10 times a day. I have to understand, I have to be the greatest advocate of our vision. That's number 1. Second, culture. If we can attract the right people, no matter what our dreams, aspirations, so we're never going to, those are the sexy part of my job. He said, those 2, everybody knows I own. The third that nobody gives me credit for, like that's his way of saying, like, yeah, I do this work, but nobody gives me credit, is go to market. And his point was, I think about go to market as a product. This is different than strategic vision for the company. That's what you do offsites for. You go on an offsite, you create a strategic, what we're going to do, where we're going to end up, all that stuff. That's not go to market. Go to market is a daily iterative way of changing things. For example, he was telling me, like, last week we made a decision on, are we going to go the agency route, or we continue to go through that, or we're going to go and hire more salespeople to go enterprise. He's like, who's going to make that decision? I have to make that decision because I have the view and all of the data around this thing. I can get recommendations from everybody, but as a CEO, I have to, because it's going to have tremendous implications on the business outcomes of it. So that's what go-to-market is, much bigger. But his point was, you make that every day. It's like a product, it's a bug fixing, right? Your bugs, you're fixing them, then your features, there's some work, some don't. So it's an iterative process. It's not a strategic vision casting or a QBR that you do every quarter offsite. It is something you do every single day. Drew, I thought that was just a very novel way of thinking about go-to-market.
Yeah. That's hard because particularly for a CEO, because if he really does have to look at it every day, it's so problematic. I mean, set the vision, hire the people, and distribute the money, right? And to me, those are the three things that a CEO really does, because it's where they spend the money is the decision that really makes, those are ultimately the decisions that drive success or failure, right?
Yeah, some people might go now to -1 if they want to be a CEO after hearing my version of what Brian does. It was at -1. We don't want to be a CEO.
There's so much that I wanted to cover.
Well,
Let's get
a question there.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and what about customer experience?
Hey, great to see you again. It's been a long time. Congratulations on your book and all that. And I think go-to-market is very important. I agree with everything you said, but I think customer experience is equally as important. I get asked a lot, who's responsible for customer experience? And I think that's an easy question. It's the CEO. He or she can delegate it to someone. And I also believe that CMOs, when they're responsible for customer experience, that's another trip to the CEO. I mean, that is so important. That's future valuation, that's ROI, that's everything. So I think the customer experience is equally as important as go-to-market strategy. That marry with it.
Yeah.
And what do you say? Is it Sangram?
Whoa. Okay. So E, as I shared earlier in the MOVE framework, was for experience. I truly thought that was the key. Oh man, it sounds so good too, right?
Yeah, it does.
Of course. Experience, ultimately, we want to have this connected, frictionless experience. We had all these definitions put together. And then I have the conversation with CEOs and they're like, you kidding me? Yeah, of course it's important, but it's not on their list of the most important things that makes or breaks the business. To them, that's table stakes. That's almost having you would not survive as a company if you don't have that anymore well put together. You would burn and go away. So to them, it's not that it's not important. To Alan's point, it's very important. But to them, that's table stakes. You got to have great culture. That's why culture is not there. You got to have great vision. You got to have a great product that works. All those things are almost table stakes now. It's so important that if you don't have that, you may not even survive. But if you want to thrive, if you want to break through, and you want to have an outsized impact on your business, then E, based on all the CEO research conversation I had, said that you gotta constantly think about expanding, either through products, through services, through verticals, through regions, through partners, whatever that is, or through different markets, going up market, down market, whatever it is, you have to constantly channel your company to have different experimentation going on the growth factor. And that's why we put in expansion. But Alan, I don't agree it's important.
Yeah. What I'm thinking when hearing this is CMOs could try to fix the customer experience and they'd be okay. CMOs who drive expansion of the business are going to win, period. Yes. End of story. All day long. And what that means is if you're the CMO who says, hey, we're going to expand overseas because we've done our homework and we think we can do it, or we're going to have a new channel partner, or we need a new product line, or we need a new vertical, that's a winning formula. To say that we're going to improve the customer experience is really nice, but it's another soft thing like brand that doesn't show up in the bottom line right away. So I feel like that conversion, that insight that you found of moving from experience to expansion is boom. That's it. That is the ultimate sort of big message here. If you want to be a CEO, if you want to really be in the driver's seat and drive the thing, you're getting past these first three things of figuring out the market, getting the operations to get the velocity going, but expansion. I'm thinking of Beth Comstock and GE Imagination and GE Health Imagination. And what that was a whole new marketplace. It was $1 billion proposition. That is expansion that can come from marketing. So it makes it very exciting to me. We are running out of time. Is there anything else in your mind that we should, as CMOs, be thinking about when it comes to go to market?
The parting thing that I don't have in the book, which gives me the ability to think about the next book when I write on go-to-market, is what I'm learning through all the work that I'm doing right now through go-to-market partners is marketers needs to start aligning around one of these three metrics, maybe four, but at least three. Either they're given the ARR number, and most marketers are aligned to do that. A few are aligned to the GRR number, the gross retention rate, which is really making sure that your churn retention that Heidi was talking about earlier. But the best, the next gen, the modern, the where the CEO path really is true for it is the NRR, is really attaching yourself is like, how can I create NRR value? Because lasting companies are going to have NRR as one of their greatest metrics. And it's just as true for the business to be surviving or not. They can have great ARR, but you can have the flames and gone. There are too many companies like that. GRR, you're kind of starting to say that, okay, we're legit, like we can survive. But thriving, lasting companies are going to be having great NRR. So if CMOs who attach themselves and understand and question and facilitate conversations around that are going to win big in the organization.
And just to be clear, just in case there's someone who doesn't know what NRR is.
Yeah, it's net retention rate. It is really how you expand your business from one product to multi-product or one region to multi-region. It is essentially saying that, can I sell more of the existing product to more people within the company so we can expand the existing customer value? And the more companies you do that and the more customers you do that, the better the valuation for the business.
Yeah. And I have to say, if we are headed into a recession, which is quite a possibility, everything's going to flip. And that's going to be even more important than ever. So getting that on everyone's radar. Well, Sangram, thank you for an incredibly vigorous, interesting conversation. So appreciate you being here. Man, we could have gone on. We'll have to do this again really soon.
Thank you so much for the exciting conversation. And we can continue that on LinkedIn or any other places. So thank you so much for the time, Drew.